On December 27, 1892, Livingstone and Biddle College, now known as Johnson C. Smith University, played in Salisbury, North Carolina, with Biddle winning 5-0. Over time, HBCU football has evolved. HBCU football's popularity continues to rise. Millions attend games each year and millions more watch on television. The HBCU bands provide some of the top entertainment in the country. Over that time, some of the best players to ever play in the National Football League played at HBCUs. Every Monday through Friday on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, national radio and television host Donal Ware takes a look at what's happening in HBCU football and talks with coaches, players, administrators, and media about the season. Make sure you join the conversation on social media. Now, here's your host, Donal Ware.
You've tuned in to the HBCU Football Daily Podcast for today, Thursday, October 12th. I'm Donal Ware. We've got a big-time football game tonight, perhaps the game of the year so far in HBCU football. It's an SIAC matchup as Fort Valley State is going to be at Benedict, and this is a game that's going to be on ESPN2. It's a game that originally was going to be on ESPNU, but has been moved to ESPN2. I think that is a super big deal for the SIAC to have a game in prime time like this. And it promises to be an outstanding football game. You know, these two teams met last year in Fort Valley. It was, I think even at the time, Fort Valley State was ahead of Benedict in the polls in both the HBCU Division II coaches poll and even, if I remember correctly, the media poll as well. And it was a blowout. Benedict came away with a blowout. Currently, when you look at the polls in the media poll, Benedict is ranked number 3, while Fort Valley State, its first week in the poll, is ranked number 9. In the Division II coaches poll, HBCU coaches poll, Benedict is number 1 and Fort Valley State is number 5. But you throw all of that out of the window and you settle this thing on the football field. Now, if I look at this Fort Valley State team, it's coming off a nice victory over Savannah State, 38-24. Savannah State is always a tough out, and Fort Valley State losing its first game of the season with an opportunity to perhaps win that football game against Tuskegee. I think it was a 4th-and-goal situation, and Fort Valley State could not convert, but that was game number 1. Since then, Fort Valley State has pretty much been lights out. Its closest game has been against Edward Waters, 34-31, and we can see Edward Waters is a good football team. Mentioned it earlier in the week. You got 4 teams in the SIAC undefeated, with Edward Waters right there with only 1 loss in the conference. When I look at the Wildcats from an offensive perspective, they can run the football. I mean, there's no question about that. 146 yards rushing per game. Giving some love to Brandon Marshall, the primary running back, 5.2 yards per carry with 5 touchdowns, 534 yards on the season. But you can't sleep on Kentrell Williams either, 4.7 yards per carry. He's got 5 touchdowns. So we know that Fort Valley State can run the football. But we also know that Fort Valley State, while it likes to run the football and can run the football, it's about Kelvin Durham, the quarterback. He's got 14 touchdowns to 4 interceptions on the season, completing about 58% of his passes. He's throwing for right at 224 yards passing per game, and he's distributing the football. That's what I like about Durham. He's distributing the football well. He's got 5 receivers that have caught 12 balls or more this season. And the thing about it, guys are catching the ball for about an average of right around 15 yards per reception. So we know Durham can get the football down the field. The one concern I may have is he's got to protect it. 4 interceptions is not a whole lot in 6 games, but if you want to beat a Benedict team, you can't afford any interceptions or any turnovers. The other thing I look at about Fort Valley State is this from an offensive perspective. Only 5 sacks. This offensive line is good. It's only given up 5 sacks all season long. Now, maybe they haven't seen the likes of a defense like Benedict with their bookends led by Danilis. They may not have seen that, but 5 sacks is 5 sacks. And I talked about this last week with Miles. If Miles could do a good job of protecting its quarterback, and it did. It did a good job. Danilis had no tackles for loss. I think they did he had 5 tackles in the game, but I think Miles did a fairly decent job, or more than a decent job, I would say, in terms of protecting the quarterback. When I look at Fort Valley State from a defensive perspective, the Sean Gibbs and company, the head coach Sean Gibbs, they're going to be committed because Sean Gibbs loves to run the football. He's one of the preeminent running backs coach, was before becoming a head coach. He was the running backs coach at North Carolina A&T. So he loves to run the football, but Fort Valley State believes in stopping the run, and they do a very good job of stopping the run. Less than 80 yards given up per game. The issue is teams have the ability to pass the football. You can have some success from a numbers perspective, okay? Purely from a numbers perspective in terms of passing the football against Fort Valley State, giving up about 270 yards passing per game. But that said, they're going to make some plays on the football. 12 interceptions as a team, that's pretty good. But the Fort Valley State doesn't do a great job in terms of forcing fumbles. Only 2 fumble recoveries all year. So 14 turnovers created by that defense is really, 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 really good. But the problem is Benedict passes the football, but they don't pass it that much. And the quarterback protects the football. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The one thing I do like about Fort Valley State also as well, their special teams, right? They're going to give you good field position. And that's the one thing I think that Fort Valley State is going to need in this football game, is going to need good field position. If I look at the numbers here, DeJuan Bell is averaging close to 28 yards per return. He's got 1 touchdown. So so look at it from this perspective. If he brings the ball out of the end zone, Fort Valley State on average is going to get the football at the 28-yard line. Generally speaking, if the ball goes in the end zone, he's probably not returning it. He's returning it probably somewhere on average, I would say, between the 3 and 5 yard line. So you're looking at a starting field position somewhere between the 31 and 35, which is good field position to start out for Fort Valley State. It's going to need those shorter fields to be able to put some points up on the board against this pretty stingy Benedict defense. When I look at Benedict, I look at the run game. Okay, the run game is absolutely outstanding for Benedict, 190 yards rushing per game. If I look at Noah Zaire Scotland, right, like he was, first team all-conference guy coming in, maybe doesn't have the great numbers in terms of rushing yards, but he's got 11 rushing touchdowns on the season, which is top 10 in all of Division II football. He's averaging 4.6 yards per carry. The other thing about that, he doesn't have to do it by himself. DeAndre Duhart actually had a really good game against Miles in the victory. He's also at 4.6 yards per carry as well. Jalen Taylor at 5.2 yards per carry. This is a team that really can run the football, talking about Benedict. I look at the quarterback in Aeneas Dennis for Benedict. He's completing 64% of his passes. He's got 10 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions on the season. And by the way, Benedict, they throw the football, but they run it way more than generally your pass to run balance is going to be more in the run category generally speaking, for most football teams, no doubt. But the Tigers run it an inordinate amount more than they pass the football, 279 rushes to 186 pass attempts. Yet, look at Dennis, 245 yards passing per game. So this is a good Benedict offense. It is very good. It's hard to say it's underrated, right? Because you look at the numbers, they look good. That offensive line is really, really good. I don't know that it's the same Benedict offense that it was last year. Something tells me, without having the numbers in front of me, last year was more of a prolific offense last year. Thing about Benedict, the offense is good. Where Benedict is hanging its hat is on the defensive side of the football. Look at the numbers. They're only giving up 55 yards rushing per game, only giving up 109 yards passing per game. Okay, now you can look at it and say, well, maybe they haven't played, prolific offenses and so forth. That was a battle against, this is a good Miles football team that Benedict beat, and showed that even though maybe the Tigers hadn't played a lot of great opponents to that point in the season, they could still go toe-to-toe with a good football team, and had to come back. Remember, scored a touchdown late to win that football game. We got to give some love. We give plenty of love to Lubert Danilis. We've been giving a lot of love to Jaden Broughton, who, he leads the team in tackles for loss at 16. Again, both Broughton and Danilis sort of neutralized against Miles in terms of tackles for loss and sacks. But we got to give some love to Giovanni Melidor. He's got 4 interceptions on the season. It's one of the reasons why this pass defense is really, really good for Benedict as well. Probably underrated. And by the way, Benedict's got 40 sacks on the season. Something's got to give here. 40 sacks by Benedict on the season, only 5 sacks given up on the season by Fort Valley State. Something has got to give in this football game. As far as a prediction, and I look at this game, and I look at the game last year, and you look at the opponents, and maybe Benedict's not dominating like it was on last year. Maybe more of that is from an offensive perspective, but they're taking care. The Tigers are taking care of the football, both in the running game and passing. Only 2 interceptions on the season as well. I think it's going to be hard for Fort Valley State to go into Columbia and win this football game. Now, you look at this Fort Valley State team. It's a team that's used to being, having some games on TV, ESPNU, on last year, or this year, I should say, with the Tuskegee game last year as well. Benedict, maybe not so much. I don't think the lights have anything to do really with either team. I think it's going to be hard for Fort Valley State to go into Benedict. I think Fort Valley State is a good football team, but I like Benedict in this football game, and I like the Tigers to remain undefeated. If I had to give a score, I probably would say my gut is telling me Benedict by 10, 11 points, or somewhere, I should say, between 10 and 14 points in this football game. Your thoughts, you can hit me up via Twitter at DWare1, at DWare1. Super excited about this football game tonight. The SIAC has had some really good football games. This game last year was a big game, your SIAC championships, but this is about as big a football game in the SIAC that I can remember in quite some time. You can look at the year-end games between Tuskegee and Miles for the Western Division championship when the SIAC was in divisional play. This is a big-time football game and one of the bigger games the SIAC has had in a good little while. So hit me up via Twitter at DWare1. Follow me while you're there, and let me know your thoughts on the HBCU National Game of the Week between Fort Valley State and Benedict. Tell a couple of friends about the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, where you can find us on the Box to Row YouTube channel. You can watch us there. Also on our website at boxtorow.com, as well as iHeartMedia.com, where you can download and Listen. On the weekend edition of Box to Row, we're going to catch up with Grambling head football coach Hugh Jackson on the program. Also, we got another celebrity guest picker. Okay, Isaac Keys. Okay, you know the film, or not the film, but the program Power Force. Okay, it's Power Force, which comes on Stars. He plays the role of Diamond. Now, when we talk, and I'm just giving you this, giving you kind of a pre-deal here. We're not going to be able to talk with him about the film because of the strike. Okay, not the film, but the talk with him not about the film, but about the show because of the strike. However, he played football at Morehouse, graduated from Morehouse, played football in the National Football League. So we'll talk a lot about that as well. And he's going to be our celebrity guest picker. All of that on the weekend edition of Box to Row. Talk with you tomorrow.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. You can also listen to the podcast at boxtorow.com, iHeartMedia, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to get your HBCU football fix on Box to Row with Donal Ware each weekend on the radio station near you, and on SiriusXM on HBCU, Channel 142, and on ESPNU Radio on SiriusXM, Channel 84. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Box to Row for the latest in HBCU football, and don't forget to tell a friend.